James, a nice, easy, relaxed work here from Improbable. Switched over to the right lead, right on cue, not being asked for any run at this point. And not surprising because, like you said, he just ran 9 days ago. So this is probably more to get the blood flowing than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to do too much after a race. You know the horse is fit. Just want to get him comfortable with the racetrack. The rider gave him a little bit of a nudge when he first started the work. But like you said, once he got in the stretch, he was very smooth, had his ears forward, looked happy.
All right, by my standards, breaking off, and there he is. He's got the neck boat again. James, the best way I can put it is he kind of looks like a loaded gun out there.
He does. He is eager, and it looks like he's really feeling good, and that's always a positive sign, that enthusiasm when they like a horse like By My Standards shows in his workouts.
Yeah, but he's not running off. I mean, he's eager but controlled. As we get a look at him there. Breaking off into the breeze, and his workouts have been incredible here at Churchill Downs. We got a chance to see a little clip of one of those from April 4th earlier. And James, what do you make of a horse that has been on the grounds and has settled in and is acclimated and is used to being here? You know, a lot of these horses are going to ship in late, and a lot of horses win the Kentucky Derby that way. But do you think it's an advantage?
I don't see how it's definitely an advantage. I think an affinity for the track, familiarity with your surroundings can never hurt a horse. And one thing about By My Standards, you know, we heard Brett Calhoun say he's going to work 6 furlongs here. He will be coming into the Derby off a 6-week layoff. The Twin Spires Louisiana Derby was the first of 7 major preps, so a little bit longer layoff than some of his rivals, and that's one of the reasons why he'll put a good stiff work into him today, Joe.
Yeah, very, very good point. When you look at the pedigree by Golden Sense, first crop of 3-year-olds this year. Golden Sense, you know, he ran well over a distance of ground, but he was more of a miler type. Right. On the dam side of the pedigree, you've got a little bit more turfy pedigree, maybe more in that mile distance range as well. So not necessarily bred for 1.25 miles, but certainly runs like a horse that might be able to get the distance.
Yeah, he does, and he's a Golden Sense, like you said, won 2 Breeders' Cup Dirt Miles. Sometimes milers make the best sires, so he's got some stamina in his female family as well.
All right, Long Range Toddy up next. A very consistent horse for Steve Asmussen throughout the Triple Crown preps. Really had his breakthrough race in the Rebel where he was absolutely loaded on the inside off the turn for home. Finished with authority for John Court. Fell flat in the Arkansas Derby, James, over a sloppy racetrack. John Court right now is not confirmed as the rider, but he's been riding, and if he does ride Long Range Toddy in the Kentucky Derby at the age of 58, he will be the oldest rider in the history of the race.
Yeah, that would be something to see. And, yeah, definitely, I thought he took a huge step forward in that Rebel Long Range Toddy. Don't know what happened last time, but he's a horse that he's coming on. He was coming on, this spring, making good progress. He didn't run that fast over the winter, ran fast in that Rebel 2 starts back. So he's the rebound candidate off of a sort of a disappointing effort in the slop.
And we're taking a look at Long Range Toddy working here for Steve Asmussen. Well documented, 0 for 19 in the Kentucky Derby. The trainer with the most starts without having a win, couple of seconds, couple of thirds. And we talked about Bill Mott. He hasn't won a Derby. Dick Mandela hasn't won a Derby. Bob Baffert will tell you, and he's won 5. This is the hardest race to win. 20 horses in the field most years. Mm-hmm. The best 3-year-olds, obviously, they're all trying something new. So to see a horseman of that caliber not having won the race yet is really no surprise. I mean, Todd Pletcher's 2 for 52.
Right. And, yeah, that's a great point. We have had some veteran trainers, though, Art Sherman and Shug McGahee in the last, 5 or 6 years win it. So it would be a great storyline as well this year if one of those guys could break through.
There's Tacitus working in company like Bill Mott as designed, and Tacitus on the inside here, James. And when you see a work like this, and Tacitus has already proven, he doesn't care if he's inside, outside, traffic, he's overcome adversity. He is a horse that certainly is seasoned coming into this race. Talk about the strategy behind putting him on the inside of a horse for this work?
Just getting them used to being inside horses, obviously in a 20-horse field. One thing about Tacitus is he's looked good in his last 2 races, but he's only raced 4 times, Joe. So, he still has a little bit of overcoming trouble was a huge thing, but I think putting him inside horses just gets him familiar, keeps him on the right path, because he's going to be trying to rally through company in the Derby from probably about mid-pack.
Just has a look of a horse that'll run all day.
He does.
He really has a look of a horse that'll run all day. Some of these workout times, as we see Tacitus in the gallop out, and
you can see he wants to keep going right there.
Right. But controlled.
Yeah.
Eager but controlled, and just doing it very effortlessly. Improbable 48 and 1/5, galloped out 101 and 2/5. By my standards, 112 and 4/5. Street Band, we didn't get a chance to catch her for the Oaks. She just left the racetrack. She's 1 minute and 2/5 for her workout. Champagne Anyone with a fast work for Ian Wilkes of 59 and 4/5. Long Range Toddy, who we just saw in 102 and 3/5. Again, thanks to Kevin Kirstein for delivering these workout times as quickly as he has. I'm sure he's going to give us Tacitus not too long from now. But yeah, James, that's what this is all about. That action was fast and furious. And again, we'll have an opportunity to go back and watch these again and have a better opportunity to evaluate exactly what we saw.
Yeah, that's Country House up there now, Joe. That's the second of the Bill Mott runners in here. He's coming off a 4th in the Louisiana Derby and a 3rd in the Arkansas Derby, so he barely got into the field. But he's another horse that looked like similar to Tacitus. I think he has the constitution to run all day long. Should really, is eligible to relish this extra furlong in the Kentucky Derby, 1.25 miles. And he's going to be a long shot. He's going to look to crash the party from off the pace at long odds.
Yeah, and that's his running style. I mean, we saw it at Gulfstream Park when he broke slowly at the start, lost about 10 or 15 lengths and still won.
Right.
Then, really proved himself in the Risen Star by running second behind the odds-on favorite War of Will. And then he came back, like you said, Arkansas Derby. He needed those points. Kind of a run-along performance that day, passing some tired horses, but he's going to be finishing at the end of the Derby. It's just a matter of how many horses he can pass.
Right, absolutely. And some horses just need races to find their best strides. Other ones are precocious, like his stablemate Tacitus. He's only raced 4 times. He's won 3 of the 4. So a little different profile, but still a dangerous horse. I mean, there's a lot of horses in the Derby this year, like Country House, Long Range Toddy, By My Standards. All those horses are going to be double-digit long shots, but one can make an argument that, hey, they can step forward and compete at the top level in the Kentucky Derby, and that's part of this the build up to it over the next 12 days, watching these workers and seeing how they're coming into it. I wasn't surprised to see that fast time for By My Standards, 112 and 4. That's sort of like in line with what Brett Calhoun was talking about, where he said he wanted a stiff 3/4 mile work. And Improbable 48-1, that was a pretty solid time as well, it looks like, at least on paper.
Yeah, Long Range Toddy, I'm not surprised that he went a little bit slower, because that's the Steve Asmussen program. That's what Steve wanted from this horse, and that's what he got. Sueño also on the track. We talked about Country House knocking on the door in some of these graded stake races. Sueño, second twice, third twice in graded stakes competition, the Sham, the Southwest, the Louisiana Derby, the Lexington. Most years he would have enough points to get into the Kentucky Derby. Now he needs some defections for Keith DeSormo.
Absolutely. Most years easily he'd be in the race, but this year he needs 4 horses to come out, 24th on the list right now. But absolutely, we've had that many defections in the past. It's different year to year how much attrition you have, but you might as well get on the grounds, and if you get it lucky and you can get in the race, so be it. If not, then you just point for elsewhere.
Keith DeSormo does an amazing job with reasonably priced sales purchases, getting him to the Kentucky Derby. We remember My Boy Jack from last year, who ran a very respectable race. We remember how much he got bet that day. A lot of people with the name Jack, or sons or brothers or fathers, betting on My Boy Jack, and put forth a pretty good performance in the Derby. He's got Sueño this year. And James, of the 20 horses in the Kentucky Derby that are in the field, they're confirmed. They're running. I mean, there's no horses really, as far as I know, that are on the fence. War of Will may be the biggest question mark off of that minor injury that he suffered in the Louisiana Derby, but he's been training well the last couple of weeks as well. So these horses on the outside looking in, you never want to see something bad happen to somebody else's horse. Circumstantially, maybe they'll get into the field, but obviously that remains to be seen.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. And you're right. And plus, Keith DeSormo had a 2016 Kentucky Derby runner-up Exaggerator,
Right.
Another bargain purchase.
70 or 80 grand.
Yeah, another bargain purchase that turned out extremely well.
You see Sueño there, very consistent and versatile performer for Keith DeSormo, who does have some horses on the backstretch at Churchill Downs this spring. And James, what an amazing spring meet this is going to be at Churchill. Record purses. The purse for the Kentucky Derby presented by Woodford Reserve now up to $3 million.
Yeah, it's going to be. I love seeing that purse increase. Looks like we're going to have a very strong meet, and obviously the Kentucky Derby week kicks it off. The first night, this coming Saturday, opening night card, and then tons of stakes races, lots of good competitive racing leading up to the main event.
There you see Sueño with a pretty spirited gallop here this morning, James. He's getting a lot out of this gallop here this morning. We'll have some information about upcoming workouts and lots of stuff that we've seen this morning as far as serious moves. It kind of had our head spinning there for about 10 minutes, James, as we saw lots of good stuff, some impressive workouts. Nobody, you can't say anything negative about any of the horses we saw today. Long Range Toddy didn't go fast, wasn't expected to go fast, looked good doing it, was very fluid by my standards. We've been seeing it the last couple of weeks, did his thing out there. And I thought Improbable for that half-mile workout off of just 9 days rest. Really, really easy work for Bob Baffert, but one that I enjoyed watching and one that I thought looked pretty good.
Yeah, I didn't see any negative impressions out there today. I mean, Tacitus didn't appear to do too much, inside of a workmate, but definitely a good-looking horse. Obviously, he's one of 7 major prep race winners that are coming into the field this year. 2 of them worked this morning. Tacitus, the Wood Memorial winner, and by my standards, the Louisiana Derby winner. And I thought that by my standards, once again, another encouraging move. He's a horse that's going to be a long shot. And getting back to Tacitus right here, you can just see the rider just has a good hold on him. Pretty gray horse, and I think he's still just growing a little bit as well, Joe, into his frame. So definitely like the finishing kick he's displayed in his previous races. This was just sort of like a solid, maintenance type drill. They didn't want to ask for too much here. Might work him a little bit faster in the final drill for Belmont. But all systems go. Tacitus is definitely going to be one of the horses. To me, he could be maybe even the 3rd or 4th betting choice. It's going to be interesting to see because he's definitely a horse that, like I've referenced a lot in this field, are lightly raced with a potential big upside to him. And if you watch the video of his races, they've been impressive.
Yeah, Tacitus for Bill Mott. Bill Mott winless in the Kentucky Derby, as we mentioned, but he's got a really live shot with Tacitus, a horse that looks like he can run all day. And for more insight, let's send it back to Ed DeRosa on the backstretch.
Thanks, Joe and James. Yeah, from this vantage point, didn't get a lot of good look at the works. So I was interested when you mentioned that Tacitus worked in company, because by the time I saw him, it was on his gallop out here at the top of the backstretch at the Lucas Gap, and he was all alone. And I don't mention that to give any insight to if he outperformed his workmate or not, but I thought he looked super professional. We'll leave it to Brandon Staubel to tell us what he sees in the morning in relation to how good these works are. But I've been around enough to know the extremes, and he just looked really powerful. Love the locomotive action on him on the gallop out. So that was good to see as someone who's a fan. And I agree with James. I think he's probably 3rd or 4th choice. Joe, you mentioned maybe 10 or 12 to 1. I think he'll probably be a little lighter than that. I think some New York money will he'll show up on him. I expect 8-1 on Tacitus. And then the one last thing I'll mention that I saw is Long Range Toddy coming off the track, ponied by Scott Blasi, and I got a thumbs up from Scott. So really didn't expect much commentary from him anyway, but worth mentioning that he thought enough. He recognized us and gave us a thumbs up. So take that what you will. But gorgeous morning out here, fast and furious, head on a swivel, as you said. We're looking forward to the next 12 days.
Thanks, Ed. And if you get a thumbs up from Scott Blasi, James Scully, that's like a 30-second quote.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I will just say this, what Ed made a good point about Tacitus. He worked in the stretch with a stablemate, but by the time he got to the backstretch, he just left, he had like dusted him and left him behind. So that's a very good gallop out. The gallop out is extremely important for these horses. Want to see them continue to, with enthusiasm, because they got a long race coming up, mile-and-a-quarter race. You're building some fitness. You want to see how they do after the wire in these, especially when they breeze.
Tacitus is bred to get a mile-and-a-quarter. Improbable's by City Zip. We don't see too many City Zips in the Kentucky Derby. Thinking more, he was a sprinter, but he's been more of a turf sire. The horses that he's produced. Improbable hasn't win on this racetrack. One of the most impressive performances of his career. That came Breeders' Cup weekend last year, James. So we know he likes this racetrack, and that's a big deal here at Churchill.
Yeah, and City Zip is a half-brother to Ghost Sapper, who won the Breeders' Cup Classic, was a broodmare sire of Justify last year. And, AP Indy is his dam sire. So he's got some stamina in his pedigree. But you're right, Joe. It's a little bit like you come back and you lose your first two races this year. You might have some questions about the distance stretching out to 1.1 miles so far. But definitely like his breeze here. Doing it well. I thought it was a fast time. He did it really easy here through the lane. And another one that galloped out with good energy after the wire.
Tough to see with the sun. He was wearing those cheaters in the video that we saw earlier. I don't see any head equipment. No blinkers, no?
No, I don't see any either. And I like the blinkers off move as well coming into the Derby. That can be a powerful handicapping tool for Bob Baffert when he takes those blinkers off. So that's a little interesting element surrounding Improbable.
Yeah, Bob said right after the race he didn't need the blinkers. He was very fractious in the starting gate, was very concerned that he was going to run his race after seeing how upset he was in the starting gate. But he certainly ran a huge race behind one of the major players in Omaha Beach, who ran tremendously well in the Arkansas Derby. Improbable didn't have the greatest of trips. Was a little bit upset in the starting gate, like I mentioned. So still an opportunity for him to put it all together, and I like what I saw today. Yeah,
like what you've seen, and like we referenced earlier, ran a big race here last November under the Twin Spires. So good to see him get over the track. He'll have two drills here, and definitely making third start off the layoff. He's like one of three major contenders for Bob Baffert.
Another horse that has been racing at Oaklawn Park in the recent preps, Long Range Toddy. We saw him with a typical Steve Asmussen move earlier today. Here he is breaking off into that workout. And we mentioned earlier he went 102 3/5. And again, this is what Steve Asmussen does. He doesn't work him too fast. Right. Probably exactly what he wanted. Scott Blasi, assistant trainer, giving Ed DeRosa the thumbs up on his way off the racetrack.
Yeah, definitely a horse that has a progressing form line to him. He won a Kentucky Derby qualifier in December, the Remington Springboard Mile, but didn't run very fast in that race. Placed in a couple races this year, but you could see his form getting better. Put it all together 2 starts back in the Rebel. And he had the luxury in his final prep that he was already in the Kentucky Derby field, had enough points, and didn't have to run well that day. And lucky for him, he was in that spot because he ran 6th in the Arkansas Derby.
Trainer Steve Asmussen, 2nd in the Derby, 2011 with Nero, and again in 2017 with Looking at Lee. But it's the horses he's run 3rd with in the Derby that have gone on to the best careers. I'm talking about Curlin and Gunrunner.
Yeah, Curlin and Gunrunner, 2 future Hall of Famers. Curlin was early in his career, only his 3rd start for Asmussen when he ran that 3rd. Gunrunner really found his best form as a 4-year-old when he won all these grade ones in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
And that's the thing about Steve Asmussen. The Derby's a huge race. Everybody wants to win it, including him. It's the race you dream about winning. But longevity is also important. We saw the longevity with Curlin. We saw the longevity with Gunrunner, who both wound up having spectacular careers.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, a horse like Long Range Toddy, one thing about him, too, is that he has some tactical speed. He raced on the lead earlier in his career. That's, I think, always an advantage because you don't necessarily want to be too far back in a 20-horse field, in my way of thinking, because there might not be a lot of pace this year. Might leave yourself too much to do if you're too far back, and that Long Range Toddy has that going for him. He could be perfectly spotted in the early going to offer a good late finish.
We mentioned Kevin Kirstein delivering us those workout times. Follow Derby Media on Twitter. That's where you're going to get not only the final times, but also the splits as well. Darren Rogers supplying those, doing a great job as always, getting that information out quickly. We do have Tacitus. He goes 50 flat for the half mile, gallops out 102 and 4/5 and 6 furlongs and 115 and 4.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Visually impressive work because he was doing it very, very easily. And by my standards, we're going to take a look at his work again right now. And I'm going to tell you the splits because, James, we talked about it. And Ed DeRosa with Brett Calhoun earlier, he wanted 6 furlongs. He wanted to get something out of this work, and he certainly did. The splits were 12 and 2, 24 and 2/5, 36 and 2/5, 48 and 3/5, 1 minute and 1/5 for 5 furlongs. The official workout time for 6 furlongs, 112 and 4/5, galloping out 7 furlongs and 126.
Yeah, those are really solid final furlongs there as well for the by my standards. Heck, from the half mile to the 5 furlong point, he went 11 and change. So he was really motoring in these latter stages of this, and really not all out either doing it. So he's a horse that just loves the track, is relishing the track. Love that gallop out as well on Tacitus. 12-second first furlong gallop out, 13-second and change second one. That's pretty strong, Joe.
I would agree, as we see by my standards wrapping up this work again, 112 and 4/5, and again, not really asked for very much. You like to see a horse work fast, but do it well in control, and that's exactly what by my standards did once again this morning. Okay, James, we saw some workouts. If you were to pick one that impressed you the most, where would you go? I'll tell you what I think, and I've been impressed by everything we've seen this morning, but who's your most impressive one?
Well, I mean, by my standards, is a horse that, like, as a horse player, I like that move. He's like an intriguing long shot to me. I don't know if he's going to be good enough to win the race, but he's the kind of horse I think could finish in the money. I liked what I saw out there from him. Tacitus and Improbable both looked good as well, but I'm going to go with by my standards for the work of the day this morning.
I'm going to go to Tacitus very slightly, just because he was, I believe, number 10 on my Kentucky Derby list going into this morning. I'm going to have to move him up because he just looks like a horse that wants to run all day, and he was so professional. He's on the inside. He galloped out great. He went faster than it looks, visually as far as his final time goes. And like I said, it looks like the 1.25 mile distance is going to be no trouble for him. Ed DeRosa on the backstretch. Ed, what are your thoughts from this morning?
Well, 3 of my top 5 worked today, including my number 1 by my standards. So I'm thrilled to hear that James liked the move, and Tacitus, definitely a horse I'm keen on. So happy to hear that, Joe, you like that one. James on by my standards. The one tidbit I did want to say is the question earlier. Someone asked why Bob Baffert didn't have the favorite. If we were actually still coupling entries, he would have the favorite. So he is the favorite to win the race. Just any individual horse isn't the favorite. Wanted to say that. But yeah, Joe, head on a swivel today. Lots of action. Probably a little quieter tomorrow since a lot of these horses won't come to the track. But we will get our first look at UAE Derby winner Pliska Parfait on the work show. Looking forward to joining you guys again.
Well, thanks, Ed. Pliska Parfait after that work yesterday, probably just walking the shed road today, probably come out for a light jog tomorrow. We'll get a look at him. And tomorrow we'll get a better look at a lot of these horses because today we were focusing on the workouts, James. Tomorrow, a lot of gallopers.
Yeah, a lot of gallopers, but, we're in the great first day here on the Kentucky Derby Work Show. Got to see some good horses, and it's going to be great the next week and a half, Joe. Excited for it.
For Ed DeRosa, James Scully, and our entire television crew here at Churchill Downs, that's it for the morning work show for this morning. As James mentioned, a great start. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time.